Joining me now, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Karen Gibson and former Deputy Director of National Intelligence Beth. It's good to have both of you with us. General, I'd like to start with you. So, in terms of where we're at in this moment, Iranian state media, citing the IRGC, now claims that they've responded to the U.S. attacks, which were, of course, a response to Iran. That can't be at this hour independently confirmed by CNN. How much stock would you put in those claims?
I think it's certainly feasible, probably directed at one of our military bases, perhaps Fifth Fleet base in Bahrain, in much the same way that we have attacked their military forces in the littoral areas that could threaten ships. But if we go back to what started this latest round of tit for tats, an unprovoked violent attack against a civilian vessel clearly violates the ceasefire, and I think should put to bed any misconceptions that Iran is approaching these negotiations in a spirit of good faith and a desire to reach an accommodation through the MOU.
So if they're not approaching it that way, Beth, as you look at it and as you look at this move by Iran and potentially what we're also looking at in terms of these American deployments, what does this tell you about how Iran plans to continue to use the Strait of Hormuz?
They intend to control the Strait of Hormuz and the flows through there. And I think that the, pretty dramatic strike, as Karen just said, against a civilian vessel, right after Vance set up this whole deconfliction mechanism where an IRGC officer is going to be sitting with CENTCOM, not that they've arrived yet, but, this whole idea that they're going to be part of this joint deconfliction, which would make them, kind of an equal party to this. They're saying, not so fast. We want to do this in the way that works for us. And so, what happens within the 60 days matters, but what happens after the 60 days in terms of Iran really being able to apply its writ, its sovereignty as it claims over the strait is something that they're trying to set that up, which means, down the road, maybe some tolls, maybe insurance that's now being offered. And, and I think that we have very little ability in some ways to stop that after the 60-day period is over, after U.S. forces begin to draw down. So we're going to have to see where this goes, but it's not great.
It's tough to see, right, getting back to a pre-war state for the Strait of Hormuz, certainly at this point in the negotiations. General, when you look at what has transpired over the last 24 hours, do you see this as Iran trying to exert control over the strait, or Iran trying to get the United States perhaps back into more active war?
I think my gut feeling would be it was to exert control of the straits. I think Beth makes some great points. They intend to play a controlling role. They do not intend for the traffic through the Straits of Hormuz to be free and unfettered as it was previously. Actually, what they desire is going to violate the UN Convention of Maritime Traffic. But that's what they desire to do. And I think they miscalculated. I think they were trying to send a message that they do intend to play this controlling role in what happens there. But I think they miscalculated, thinking that if it didn't cause fatalities and if it didn't strike a U.S. vessel, that maybe we wouldn't retaliate, that they were trying to send a message. And clearly they were wrong.
Beth, how is this playing with some of the other Gulf states? What we've seen over the last 24 hours and the support, whether they support, I should say, the U.S. response?
Right. I mean, they just signed a joint agreement with the United States, the Gulf Cooperation Council. That's all the Gulf states, saying that Iran couldn't control the strait and that there would be no tolls. And so in a way, I think that, Iran is saying, well, too bad, we actually are. And so while I agree that, they wanted to do this in a way that wouldn't escalate, I also think that Iran is not afraid to escalate because they think in the end we will stop before going back to full-scale war. The Gulf states, to answer your question, know that. Right? They understand what the deal is right now. And the fact that Iran is willing to do that says it all. And it says it all to them. They are going to have to deal with Iran, and they know they can't rely on us 100% to prevent Iran from doing that.
As all of this is playing out, Israel actually signed a trilateral agreement earlier today with Lebanon and the United States. Prime Minister Netanyahu announcing Israeli forces would actually withdraw from 2 areas of Lebanon, transferring them to the Lebanese army. General, what potential impact could this have on both the conflict in Lebanon and frankly, U.S. negotiations moving forward? But, could this derail any of that?
So certainly every aspect of this conflict, whether it's the difficulties of just having normal transit through the Straits of Hormuz, we're not even talking right now about eventually getting to discussions about the nuclear program, and then the conflict between Lebanon and Israel, or Lebanese Hezbollah and Israel. Each one of these is fraught with complications. I think that President Netanyahu's move here is diplomatically important in that it removes, at least for now, a barrier to discussion with Iran. I don't think it's militarily significant. He's not going to give up terrain that is important to the defense of Israel. He's not going to give up high ground or any kind of area that Hezbollah could use to launch attacks into Israel, and he's not going to give up terrain immediately adjacent to Israel. So militarily, it doesn't change things, but it does buy some diplomatic space, and it removes one more reason for Iran not to negotiate with us, at least for now.
General Gibson, Beth Sanner, appreciate your insight. Thank you both.